Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Subscribing to My Podcast. Because I have a new guest featured every week, it makes it very difficult to maintain consistent viewership. So if there's one thing that you can do to support me or the guest featured on the show, it's by interacting with my channel in every way that you can. You can always decide to unsubscribe later if you decide that you hate me or my show. With that plugging aside, enjoy my discussion with Colby Brandt and Vlasek are both running for the 2025-2026 student body vice president and president. This is a really exciting race. Hopefully this is going to come out in tandem with the other slate so you guys can watch and compare the two. But I've been following these guys on Instagram and seeing some of their points, and I'm really excited to sit down with them and talk about the stuff that they're doing. But Colby, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and then tell some of the viewers some important things that they should know about you.
Yeah, well, hello everyone. My name is Colby Brandt. I'm a sophomore majoring in agriculture and rural policy studies, originally from ISU, Minnesota, just about 3 hours from campus. Right now I'm currently serving as the Director of Government Affairs for Iowa State Student Government, and a little fun fact is I traveled abroad to Nepal last spring.
Wow. And then, Will, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself as well and just continue to tell some of the viewers some important things they should know about you.
Yeah, my name is Vlasek. I'm a sophomore majoring in agricultural systems technology, so I spend most of my days in Sukup, and so it's a pretty beautiful building, and I'm pretty blessed to have that. And I'm originally from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and so at home in Cedar Rapids, I have some cows, and those keep me busy, but if I can't be home and working with them, I have an app on my phone that I follow along and watch the cameras. So that's what keeps me busy. That's my passion, and hence it relates to my degree. And so I'm really excited to be here with you today. And I'm also really excited to be running and have the opportunity to possibly serve in this position on campus.
Yeah, this must be really exciting. This is, and I've talked to a lot of people who are running. I mean, these 4 weeks are like go, 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 like really exciting, really exhausting. And you guys are working to, visit all of the clubs, all the people that you need to do. Can you kind of just walk me through like how this campaign has been going so far? Like, what has it felt like? What have you guys been doing? And just walk me through what the campaign looks like.
Yeah, so far we've had a really strong start with our campaign. First Saturday, February 1st, we were out handing out hot chocolate to people waiting in line for the K-State basketball game, really making those connections, meeting students, really getting to know them, understand their priorities, and also giving them a cup of warm hot chocolate to keep warm in the almost below zero weather. But we've been really busy working on connecting with students, meeting them where they're at, and really learning about how they think student government can best support them throughout the year.
Yeah, and then the next day, we had 60 of our team members, or what we call coalition leaders. We met on Central Campus, and we put chalk everywhere. And so if you were on campus like the following 3 days, you probably saw Brandt Vlasek just sprawled everywhere. Like I remember coming back to campus the next day to go to class, and I was kind of like, this is crazy. This is kind of ridiculous. But it was really cool. It was really cool to have that everywhere. And I guess get people aware that student government is a thing, because a lot of people don't know it is a thing. And then the day after that, we handed out pizza right outside of Parks Library. Gave out a lot of pizza, had a lot of really great conversations. It was a really good time. And then as of now, we've been running all over campus, all over Ames, delivering our points, sharing our vision, sharing our message. And it's been a really phenomenal time. So we'll spend the next 2 weeks or so doing that. And then hopefully we'll wrap off the campaign with some really cool events as well.
Yeah, and then do you guys have anything that you can share, with the audience or us about the future of the campaign? Any big events happening? Any big additions? Anything new that, anything exciting coming up with the campaign?
Yeah, our team is working on planning some fun events for voting days, which are March 4th and 5th. So definitely going to have food on campus. Our merch was just ordered as well, so be on the lookout for merch. And
We've got some buttons, a lot of buttons coming in, some stickers, and they're like holographic. So that's just I just thought that was pretty neat. Yeah. So we've got some of that stuff coming in, and continue to hopefully pass it around at student org meetings, and hopefully also just on Central Campus.
Yeah, so it's a lot of exciting stuff. Definitely a lot of socializing, getting your name out there, name recognition, making sure that you're meeting with a ton of people, and expressing those points. I wanted to hear about your guys' points, and I was thinking if you guys could kind of outline them for me, and then we can kind of pick at each one individually. But let's talk about some of these platform points and what you guys are running on.
Yeah, so Will and I started to develop our platform back in early November. Originally, we created a list of all the things that bothered us on campus, things we'd heard from students that were concerns and that kind of thing. And then we were able to break it down into 3 different categories. And a common theme was we've got your back because you deserve to be supported as a student at Iowa State when you're paying thousands of dollars to be here. So we've got your back when you want to be safe. We've got your back when you want to be involved. And then we've got your back when you want to be supported as our main 3 categories of our platform points.
Yeah, and let's I guess let's start with we got your back when we want to feel safe. What does that look like? What are some of these incentives and what are these things that you guys are wanting to do?
Yeah, so the first one is partnering with the Iowa State Police Department to grow awareness about some of the existing resources on our campus, but then also working to enhance them. One of the key issues that we've noticed throughout our campaign is that a lot of students don't know the resources that are available to them, like virtual walk home, mobile blue light, safe ride, those kind of things, and how those are resources available to students. And that they should use them. So really working to spread awareness. And then Chief Newton had a few other ideas for projects as well. So how we can best support them in those endeavors as well. Second on that list is supporting student safety on 801 Day. So if you've seen the golf carts, Dr. Younger handing out water and liquid IV and those kind of things, we're excited to partner with them if elected and really help to make sure that our students are safe on that day. We'll never fully be able to eliminate 801 Day, but we can practice harm reduction and make sure our students are safe at the end of the day. And then next, with the safety pieces, student legal services. So on the 6th floor of the Memorial Union, there's 2 lawyers available to students, and one of their main things they can help represent you on is tenant rights. So signing your first lease, we know that when you're a first-year student, it's a big task to sign your lease and find out what apartment you want to live in, but just to help you understand your tenant rights and make sure that our students are making informed decisions.
Yeah, and so it sounds like points 1 and 3 are going to be primarily communications based. It's going to be getting the word out there that these resources are available to you. How do we plan on communicating this? What implementations can, I guess, student government do to make sure that people know about these things?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a little bit more about student government is we have a dedicated team of PR people from a variety of different colleges on campus. So really working with them to help get that message pushed out. Student government is in a very unique situation because there's not many other organizations that have access to impact every student on campus, specifically with emails and marketing campaigns and that kind of thing. So we really see that as definitely a vital component of these 2 platform points is really working with PR and then also with Chief Newton and Student Legal Services, really just to get that message pushed out there.
Yeah, and so I guess it comes under the assumption that these points or these things haven't been advertised well enough to that everybody knows them or knows that there's access. So I guess do you guys have any insight on effective ways to communicate to students that haven't been done before, or did like Chief Newton come up with some of these ideas like this is how we should do this, or like these are ways to advertise for students? I guess how are we going to get people engaged with this information in a way that hasn't been done before maybe?
Yeah, so a really inexpensive way to reach out to a lot of students that's actually proven to be incredibly effective is posters. And you may not think that you like really pay attention to posters because they're kind of everywhere. But there's been studies done that show that when you see a poster, whether or not you like register that you remember that information, you do, and it's sunk in. And so student government with its funding can at a very low cost hang those posters everywhere. Also emails, even if you just scan through it and then delete it, the dozens of emails we get from Iowa State affiliated organizations every day. Even if you just scan through it and you see just a small piece of information that's relevant to you, I think that's a job well done. It's all about just getting information in front of students, like student legal resources. Last night we were at a sorority chapter, and Colby asked, raise your hand if you've heard of the free legal resources on campuses, and there were like 2 hands that were raised. And so not a failure on student legal resources, but definitely an area in which we can all improve to realize that you've already paid for these services. They're already available to you. You just need to know that they're out there.
Right. Okay. And that's really interesting too. It's one of the hardest parts is one, we have all these resources, but communicating them is like another step. Mm-hmm. It's like another step in the direction. And I like to just make sure that people have like, actionable plans that are like, we're going to make sure that people know about it in this way. And then in regards to the 801 day, with the IV, is this something like, I know that we already, is this something that we realistically can expand? Is this something that we can kind of put funds to? Are there any like legal gray areas with kind of like almost, it's like kind of an endorsement, but not really, like this allowance? Like, have we talked to people to make sure that this is something that we can realistically do?
Yeah, we had a great conversation with Dr. Younger about this, and that was some of the questions that her division faced when they first started doing this. But they noticed students were being unsafe. They noticed there was a problem. And so she was actually out for other things on Cyclone Welcome Weekend, and she had a bunch of extra water in her golf cart, and she drove around and she just started handing water out. And then that program eventually grew years later. But in conversations with her, as we shared this idea, she said, we already do this. It's got a lot of really good reception, a lot of really good response. Just unfortunately, the financial resources and the personnel resources needed to expand that, to get more golf carts, more drivers, more water, more liquid IV is really expensive and laborious. And so that's where student government comes in, not only with the funding, but also with the personnel to do so. And so her office is already doing this. This is something that they've gotten a lot of really good reception to. And we really want to just help them take it the next step further.
Yeah, yep, and that makes sense too. It's always tricky to navigate, like, how do we handle 801 day? How do we not? Because obviously there's not university things happening on 801 day versus like things that we're trying to do. So it's always interesting to navigate those things. And it's nice that you guys are trying to, infuse some of those responsible habits into, a generally irresponsible tradition that we do, but a lot of people are involved in. So it's pretty cool that you guys are looking to tackle that. Are there any other points in regards to safety that, you guys are looking for, you guys are interested in doing?
Yeah, those are our really big three things that are on our platform. Working on some other things in the background that we think we might be able to get done before. But of course, we don't want to make any promises on those before. Some of them have to do with, you ever heard of an angel shot?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and for anyone who doesn't know what an angel shot is, it's if you're at a bar or restaurant and you feel uncomfortable or unsafe, you can reach out to the bouncer, the bartender, your server, and request an angel shot. And there's multiple types of angel shots. But basically, they would get you the services or the help that you needed to feel safe in that moment. And so working on what that can look like to maybe just get it done now, because there's been some movement in the past with that. We recently talked to Student Veterans of America, and they talked about how they've been trying to do that. They just don't have the oomph behind it to get it across the finish line and communicate that with the bars and restaurants here in Ames. So we're working on that in the background to see maybe what we can do to get that off the ground. But of course, that's not necessarily a part of our campaign.
Yeah. And essentially, you guys are open to reception for like different ideas for safety and things like this too. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most important things about our campaign is just listening to the student voice. I think that's something that's missing in student government, but really passionate about meeting students where they're at, evolving our campaign points to fit student needs. So.
Yeah. Well, let's jump to this next point, which I believe engagement, or what was the next one with the E? You want when you want to be
involved?
Yes, involved.
Involved.
So talk to me about like what this looks like and what are some of these main points of getting involved.
Yeah, with involvement, it kind of ties back to that 801 day, but like me and Colby had sat down and we kind of talked through some things, and we were like 801 day is kind of like that defining day when you're an Iowa State student in Ames, Iowa. It's that Saturday before classes start. Like that's the defining day. And there's no like tradition, no tradition or no celebration there. I mean, it's kind of just irresponsible in general, and a lot of students participate in it. So we kind of brainstormed like, how can we maybe take some attention off that day, off that weekend, and divert it to maybe like a more positive cause that more students could get behind. And then we started talking about, when we were in high school, especially at my high school, like homecoming was a really big deal. I remember that whole week, like our school colors were orange and black. And so I would wear orange and black every single day. And there was like a parade. And then people that didn't normally go to homecoming, football games, they were at the football game. I mean, we were just excited. We didn't know why necessarily we were excited for homecoming, but it was just a big deal in high school. And I think a lot of people share, that experience of that excitement, for that kind of defining point in our year. So we looked around, and Iowa State has a really great buy-in right now through Homecoming Central. There's a phenomenal team at Homecoming Central working with Iowa State alumni, and they host a lot of really great things. There's a ton of buy-in from the Greek community. And so our next step was how can we get buy-in from the rest of campus? So we know that there's an overwhelming need for kind of a central day or a central event, and there's already some work in the background with Homecoming. So how can we help amplify that? And to us, that looked like a partnership between Homecoming Central, Student Union Board, who hosts large events. I mean, that's their mojo. And then student government work together as a trio to really pull off a homecoming event. We were thinking, the Friday before the homecoming football game, Central Campus right on the lawn in front of the Campanile, bring in artists, not only national artists that you see on Apple Music and Spotify, but also local artists, students, food trucks wrapping all the way around campus, maybe some dedicated ride routes to get people to and from the commuter lot, working in collaboration with the ISU PD to make sure it's a safe event, but hopefully build like a kind of a touchstone moment here, kind of like a cornerstone, like this is the event that we look forward to as Iowa State students. And that was our thought with it, with some collaboration. And so that was the first piece of involvement, get students involved on campus, get them excited about homecoming.
Yeah, and that's really exciting too. I guess with the planning of a big event, you know what I mean? It's always difficult to get so many hands involved, and so you kind of have to start this process really early.
Mm-hmm.
And so homecoming happens at the beginning of the year, so that would involve a lot of work in the summer. That would involve a lot of work with a bunch of different programs. Is this something, I guess, like feasible? Is this something that you guys have maybe talked to some departments to make sure the logistics of this would work? What kind of, I guess, logistics testing have you guys done with an event of this size?
Yeah, so collaboration-wise with the other two organizations that aren't student government, we'd have conversations with them, and there's a lot of excitement around this idea and help amplifying all three of our organizations. So feasibility-wise with buy-in from other organizations is there. When we had a conversation with Chief Newton of Iowa State Police Department, he shared some thoughts about location and like the potential security needs it would have, bringing in extra, law enforcement and security to make sure nothing bad happened, the presence of student IDs to ensure that you were an Iowa State student, and all those sorts of things. So we've had those conversations. We've shared this with the Division of Student Affairs, who would ultimately kind of oversee kind of a project like this. And so we've before we've made any promises or we posted anything on Instagram or we made any big statements about our platform, I mean, we checked the boxes with everybody, make sure that these things were like feasible, realistic, and then also, of course, fiscally responsible. Because student government, is about $2.7 million budget, but at the end of the day, that $2.7 million can be slimmed down pretty quickly by a few big events. So we wanted to make sure we covered all our bases before we announced a project of really this size.
Yeah. And that's probably the responsible thing to do. You know what I mean? I can't imagine that you guys came in with no information on like whether or not this could happen. But it's always nice to know how these events end up getting funded or how these things work. What other things in involvement were we thinking about for?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, that $2.7 million. So every single student at Iowa State pays a $98 student activity fee every semester. You hear about it every year, and you hear about it every time these election comes around. Like that gets brought up more and more, and everyone gets all excited and worked up about it. But it's like $400-ish if you stay here for 4 years, right? And if you stay for grad school, it's even more. If you do, a fifth-year victory lap, it's even more. I mean, all those things add up. But at the end of the day, it's a big investment you're making into student government, and student government, allocates that money to a lot of great causes all over campus in the city of Ames. And we really think that accountability is key, transparency is key. So we think a cent-by-cent breakdown is really in need. I mean, a pie chart showing that, this percent of your student activity fee went to this activity, and this percent of your student activity fee went to this event. So if you're a student and you see things that, maybe I don't, believe in money being spent that way, or maybe I really believe we should spend more money in another way. I mean, that's buy-in not only for student government to be transparent, but also give students an opportunity to say, okay, I have a concern about that, or that makes me excited. Maybe I want to get involved in student government. So we think transparency is key, and displaying what student government is doing cent by cent is super important.
Yeah, and I guess my biggest question with this is how receptive has student government been with this kind of transparency with that money being spent? Not that I imagine that it's like secretive or that it's like we don't want people to know what's happening with this, but I imagine that they would have been a little bit more public with this information in the past if it had been brought up. So I guess what kind of conversations have you had with members of student government? What's the general vibe of this push?
Yeah, and it's the information's out there, and if you want more specifics, I mean, you're just an email away from getting those specifics, right? But a lot of students don't have the time, don't want to, maybe don't care enough to really dig in. And so this is just a project we'd be willing to take on, being super transparent. So saying student government isn't transparent now isn't maybe the right way to go about it, but could we always be more transparent? Could we be always be more clear about where his money is going? Absolutely.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I think the transparency will be nice. I know that Martin and Quinn had kind of brought this to the forefront pretty loudly last year about the amount of money that we're paying, to this thing. So I feel like they've started a trend for the next, 20 years, every person is going to be like, okay, but what about our $94?
Yeah.
So it's very exciting to hear that this tradition has been brought on with people talking about this money. So what other points with involvement were we thinking about doing?
And then the final one. So vast majority of students here at Iowa State are involved in a student org in some way or another, whether that's super specific and niche to your major, or whether it's a huge organization on campus that represents all sorts of students, right? A lot of students are involved in student organizations, and a big piece of student government's job is funding those student organizations. And as we've talked to leaders of clubs on campus and leaders of chapters on campus, we've kind of heard a common theme come up, and it's that it's really confusing and it's really complex. And if I want to receive funding, even maybe a little bit, I feel like I have to jump through a dozen hoops and have 20 meetings and send 100 emails, right? And it really shouldn't be that way. We should, along with transparency, we should be super clear about how funding happens. And there's been steps that are super visible towards making that happen. I know just probably about a week ago, the student government sent out an email sharing, how to get funding and things like that. But it can always get more simple. It can always get easier to understand. And so we really want to put together a really great finance team who can make this process as simple as possible and really, be dedicated towards making sure that if a student organization wants funding, we can help them work towards being in a position to receive it.
Yeah. Do you have any specific implementations you would do, like specific ways that you might be able to cut down this process, or specific devices you could use to present this kind of information? Like how, specifically would you plan on making this process a little bit easier?
Yeah, I think a one-pager is always really great. A one-pager that breaks it down on like a really macro level, like here's step one, here's who you've got to talk to first, here's step two, this is the form you've got to fill out, so on and so forth. Like on a macro level, one-pager that you can send out to, presidents and treasurers of student orgs. Be like, okay, this is an, high-level overview of how you get funding. And it might even come to a lot of student org leaders as a surprise that they can receive funding from student government. And so with that piece, it's communicating that well, not only sending an email about the finance options from student governments, but also if Colby and I had the opportunity to serve in this position, it's getting out in front of those student org leaders and sharing, like, we want to help you achieve your goals. We want to help you receive the funding you need. We want you to throw these really cool events that students really get involved in. And so it's being in front of student leaders, it's sharing what student government can do for them, and then making the process as simple and pain-free as possible.
Yeah, and that makes sense too. I know clubs is like one of the primary ways that people can get involved with the stuff that's happening here, right? So it's really important that we can fund those clubs. I'm right now trying to get funding for my club right now, so maybe I'll talk to you after this and see what I can do to make that process a little bit easier. So, but are there other points with involvement that we would want to chat about maybe before we move on to the next one?
No, that covers the three big ones we have under the involvement category.
Are there any like side projects that you're not like super committed to, but you're thinking about, like maybe this would be cool, or maybe other event ideas or things like that? Or
yeah, we had met with some members of the Greek community, and they had shared that they think that they could take Greek Week to the next level, and that was just like a really quick conversation and question we had at a meeting last night. And the answer was we haven't really thought about that yet, but if you have a really great idea, we'd love to look into what we can do to make that happen. So I think with involvement on campus, if there's something that'll get students involved, something that'll get student buy-in, something that'll get people back on campus after they leave class, we're all for hearing it and making it happen.
Yeah, and that's really exciting stuff too. I know the Greek Life does a lot of involvement too, and a lot of people say that this is like the closest group of people that they have is the Greek Life. So it's nice that student government, to me, it feels like Greek life is kind of separated from college. Like once you're there, you're in Greek life, and that's like a separate journey from being a college student. But they're college kids too, right? So it's nice that you guys are supporting them in that way too.
Yeah.
Let's move on to support, which is the third one. What are we doing for support? What are some of these main points? And I'd love to hear what you guys are doing.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite categories within our platform. Up first being funding an affordable airport shuttle program to the Des Moines airport. So right now the Department of Transportation offers airport shuttles to students around $50 to $100 depending on the time of the year. This service is really beneficial for students, and there's definitely a need for it because we all know that Uber at 4 a.m. or relying on a friend at 4 a.m. to get you to the airport when you're 45 plus minutes away depending on traffic and road conditions and all the other things is not reliable. But what is reliable is the Iowa State Department of Transportation Airport Shuttle Program. I mean, they'll pick you up, drop you off, make sure you make it to your flight, and that ultimately you're able to make it home to your family for holiday breaks. But like I said, that's a pretty expensive program right now. So how we can work with student government and student government funding to kind of alleviate some of that financial burden because college is expensive. But then also, like once again, spreading the awareness about that and making sure that students know that that resource is available to them.
Yeah, and I think that's I always love talking to people in student government because they're always alluding me to problems that I don't necessarily have to face, but they exist. So it's really interesting to see people engaging with this. And then you're from Minnesota, right? So
Yes.
you get to deal with this, although only 3 hours away.
Yep.
But you're basically an Iowan, but
Yeah.
you get to deal with this too. What I will say, the thing that jumps out at me first, though, is that it seems like an expensive problem to tackle for an intuitively small population. So I guess like financially, how can we kind of justify like me paying for this, but I don't ever have to use a flight, right? So do you have any like numbers of people who take advantage of this? Like what percentage of Iowa State lives out of state? Stuff like this. Any kind of information to kind of help alleviate those stresses for me.
Yeah, there's a good chunk of Iowa State's population lives out of state, but a good chunk are international students who are paying, out of state students might pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a flight, but international students might pay thousands and thousands, right? And that's a really expensive bill, to make it home for summer or to make it home for, winter break and all those things. So that subset of the, our student population here really relies on those services, really relies on flights to see friends and family and get back home. And so there's a lot of things that happen, within student government and on campus that a lot of students isn't necessarily a problem that we face, right? And this flight thing isn't a problem that Colby and I face, but we've realized a lot of students, have this issue on campus. I don't know if you're on the Iowa State Snapchat story. Yeah, so on the Iowa State Snapchat story, any Iowa State students can post on there. And it was probably before winter break, there was dozens and dozens of posts. Can anybody give me a ride to the airport? I'll pay you $20. Is an Uber reliable when I need to make it to my 6 a.m. flights? All those sorts of things, right? Students just really concerned last minute, how am I going to make this really expensive flight? And it was just kind of overwhelming. And then like the Iowa State's parents page on Facebook, there were hundreds of parents posts, how can I get my, student to the airport? There was all those questions. And so it seemed kind of like an overwhelming concern that wasn't solved. And so we did some looking around and we met Director Jeremy Paul at the Department of Transportation. And he was like, yeah, we do this, but either people don't know about it and it's kind of expensive even though we do it at no profit. I mean, it's an at-cost thing. And so we had a conversation with him, how can we make this happen? And so using student government channels to really publicize these things, and then also using student government funding to, support the students who need it. But hundreds of students use that service this year. So you can do 100 times their $45-ish they pay for a semester, and it works out to be able to fund a program like this pretty proportionally to the amount of students that take advantage of it.
Yeah, and I think it's really nice that you guys are working towards helping populations that maybe you don't even fit in, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the whole point, is to represent the students and to represent all of the students, even if it's not something that you necessarily struggle with. So I think that's really cool. What other points do we have for support?
Yeah, within this one too, we have sharing the resources to prevent sexual violence before it even occurs. So Iowa State Student Health and Wellness has phenomenal programs, Green Dot, Green Flags, and some other programs as well for students that really take you from being a bystander to being able to intervene and make sure that people are safe on our campus. But just this past Sunday, we had our entire campaign team get Green Dot trained and certified. So it was a lot of those people's first time taking that program and really weren't aware about that. But one of our ideas with this is implementing that at orientation or within the one-time classes. This is a vital time period for first-year students, and it might be the most important thing they could learn at orientation or during their one-time classes, how to intervene if you see a situation, and just really having the resources and knowledge and what's available on this campus to support them or their friends if they're ever in need of that support.
Yeah, and that's really interesting too. I know that just because of the involvements that I've been in, I feel like I've been green dot trained over 9 times just because of the ways that I interact with this campus. So it's very interesting to hear that people haven't been trained. I do know that at Destination Iowa State we have a green dot thing that you can go to, but most students choose not to go to this. I think it's that Saturday in the morning, so that would probably tell you everything you need to know as to why people aren't going to this. But I guess the immediate confrontation would be people saying that, they don't need this training or that it's not effective or that it's too boring or something like that. How can you kind of like convince, the people that this is a training like worth putting in the 101 classes or in that orientation?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And I can see kind of some of that concern, but I think it's just ultimately it's a resource that's there to support students. So I think students need to know and be educated about the resources that are available to them because they might not need to use it, but they might need to use that for a friend or really connect their friends with that support. And ultimately, that's what Cyclones are here for. We all care about each other. And I think it's really just instilling on day one with our first year students that culture of care that if you see something, say something, but then also equipping them with the resources to be successful and connect friends, anyone else to the resources available to them.
Yeah, and that's really great stuff too. Like I said, I've been through Green Dot. It's awesome. I think it's a really good program too. So, but I do know that some people, especially when it comes to DIS, people are just like, I don't want to go to that, right? Yeah. So it would be nice to like kind of force like at least one session so that everyone can kind of know what's going on too. So, what other stuff do we have for support? What other points?
Yeah, and finally, one service that students on this campus use nearly every day, and a vast majority of us do, is SciRide. We've got SciRide. The public transportation in this generally small town of Ames, Iowa, is really phenomenal. Per capita ridership is number 3 in the nation, behind, I believe, New York and San Francisco. Yeah, so that's really incredible. Ames, Iowa, to be up on a list like that, right? But a primary amount of the ridership in that number is students. In fact, the vast majority of it. And so students use this service every day, and they may not have a car. They choose to, make maybe the environmentally friendly decision and take the bus, or maybe the more convenient decision, or whatever it is. Students use it every day. And one thing we came up to is, like, I remember when I was a first-year student here, I lived at MWL. I remember the bus was so confusing. I came from, like, small-town Iowa. I never really used public transportation, and the bus was incredibly confusing for me. And so I don't know if you've been outside of, like, UDCC or Upper Friley recently and used those bus stops there, but inside of the shelters, there's these big TVs, and they show you when the next bus is coming. And if you go out there, especially on a cold day, you'll see students just stand there and stare at those screens, wait for the next bus as it ticks down, from 3 minutes to 2 minutes to 1 minute, and you could feel the excitement building, right? But if I was a first-year student, I had never used public transportation on this level, and I had seen like a screen like that just showed me how far the next bus was away, that'd be super handy. And so we had some great conversations with the team at SciRide about the success of this, and they wanted to ensure that those TVs made it through a football season before they expanded it, and they made it through a football season. Looks like they're making it through some winter weather, and so we'd like to expand that to stops across campus. And then our vision is, after we see that really an outstanding success with like the timing of buses, it'd be great if those screens could flip through some other information, like, okay, if you're at Upper Friley, what routes do you need to take to get to a doctor's office? Or what routes do you need to take to get to a pharmacy or a grocery store, all those other essential things that you need to, be a living human being and be healthy and all those things. It'd be great if those screens really showed you those things. And so that's kind of like the further iterations. But like I said, we had some great conversation with the team at SciRide about really implementing those widely used and very popular bus stop screens across campus. I mean, those small improvements, some things that it's not a drastic change, but a small improvement like that can really improve your experience in your just day-to-day life as an Iowa State student.
Yeah, well, every time I look at one of those printed out maps, my head explodes. I've been here for 4 years, and I still I know the few bus routes that get me from the 3 places I go to on campus, but other than that, I don't. So I've never even seen the screen that you guys are talking about because I don't use that bus stop, right? But that sounds really nice. I guess I'm questioning a little bit student government's involvement in this process. So it seems like SciRide might already be implementing this. So how does student government kind of play into this SciRide innovation?
Yeah, so SciRide in itself is a partnership between 3 organizations. One's Iowa State University as a whole. The second one is the City of Ames, and the third one is student government. So the ability to have like this incredible public transportation system, a third of it is the result of student government's involvement. And there's a contract in place where millions of dollars each year go to fund SciRide. And a lot of students really enjoy it and take advantage of that, and I think that's great. But TV screens are expensive, and SciRide runs on a really tight budget. And when you go into their office, I mean, they run a huge enterprise. They have routes going everywhere, drivers all over the place. But if you go to their office, it's like a handful of people working. I mean, they're incredibly efficient, and they get a lot of money and funding from student government, Iowa State, and the City of Ames, but it's not enough, and so they rely a lot on federal grants. So the improvements to some of the bus shelters, like the one at Upper Friley, is really a result of federal grants. And so those, you don't know when you're going to get them. You don't know how much you're going to get, right? And so they're running on a really tight budget. And in order to make those improvements on campus and to put those as a higher priority on their list, they just need the money to do so. And that's where we come in. Student government is and will continue to be a really great partner of SciRide because students are impacted by it. And this is one small, relatively in the grand scheme of things, low-cost innovation that we can make to make, SciRide experience better, and then ultimately just the student experience better.
Yeah, and SciRide's awesome. It's one of those things that I find myself continually thankful for, like, especially when it's cold, but even then, just like the well-oiled machine. Like, if you really just stop to think about all the parts that go into Iowa State, like from your orientation experience to the time you graduate, all of the departments and people that you took advantage of to, like, get to where you are, really, really awesome stuff. So SciRide is one of those things that's kind of criminally slept on, so I'm really glad that you guys are working with these people in multiple ways too. Are there other parts with support, other points or other ideas that you guys have in terms of support that maybe you guys aren't fully committed to yet but are kind of rattling around in there?
Yeah, so supporting students is the number one goal of student government. So those are our 3 main ones. We try to have 3 for every, category, so to make 9, major points in total, because we believe that they're, you can't have a million points. I mean, we all, there is a million different things we want to do, but we only have a year's time. And especially between the transitioning in and then transitioning out of this role, I mean, you need to be super efficient with your time. You need to make sure that you don't lie. I mean, you can do things that are realistic and feasible. So those are our 9 things. But if students have ideas of things that student government can do to further support them in the future, I mean, we're open ears. We'd love to make those things happen if you feel like there's a need on campus.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about your guys' campaign, and this is kind of different from the other campaign, is that you are just recently involved in student government, or you're looking to get involved in student government, so you don't have the same background, and this can be a good and a bad thing in certain ways. Can you guys talk to me, I guess, about like your experience in student government and how that how you're going to use that to influence your guys' campaign, or if you guys won, like how are you guys going to engage with student government having a little bit less experience than maybe the other slate?
Yeah, I can start because my experience is wildly different than Colby's. So, like I said, I'm a second-year student here, and so actually tomorrow, Wednesday, I will go in to have my confirmation hearing to be a senator for the United Residents off campus. That's been something about 6 months in, brewing and trying to put together and trying to get my foot in the door there. But so this will be my first true experience within student government. I followed pretty closely just because I find it incredibly fascinating, because where else do you get, a place where students are in charge of distributing $2.7 million? I mean, it's a big deal, right? And so I followed it since I've been a first-year student here, since I stepped foot onto campus. And so when Colby approached me with this idea, I thought it was super cool because we would get to do a lot of impact. But experience-wise, I always like to say this is like an executive level role. Like, this is leading on a high level, a big organization, and that's not a new experience to me. I spent a majority of my freshman year here at Iowa State involved in FFA. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the Blue Jackets that roam around Ames in April, right? We all see them, flocking onto campus.
Right.
But I had the opportunity to serve as an Iowa State officer, so serve on the board of directors within that association, oversee around a $1.2 million budget, work with professional staff, and then travel across the state of Iowa and nation to serve. And so that experience of leading at what I like to call like an executive level, like a high level, isn't something new to me. And I would love to be able to transfer those skills I gained within FFA and then also other organizations into student government. But I also think I spent a year and a half being just a normal student. So I spent a year and a half going to, the clubs that I enjoy and the clubs that I learned from, a year and a half not being involved in student government. So I truly understand the student experience here, of just being a day-to-day student that's not involved in student government. And I think that's something that student government can always use more of. Real, everyday students, wanting to make a change. And I think that's what I'm all about.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me. I know that, like I said, there are perceived benefits and costs to having experience and having not experience.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to talk to the campaigns and answer that questions. But Colby, talk to me about your experience and how that kind of plays into your predictions if you were to win presidency.
Yeah, thank you. So right now I'm currently serving as the Director of Government Affairs for Iowa State Student Government. So some of my main responsibilities include leading advocacy strategies at the federal and state levels. So identifying those key issues for students on campus, a variety of different issues. And then taking them to our legislators in Des Moines and then also in Washington, D.C. We'll be going out to D.C. in just a few short weeks, so very excited to represent our students on the federal level. But really what this role has taught me is the importance of connecting with students, because every student is going to have a unique experience on our campus, but it's how you can gather a lot of unique experiences and then find common themes and issues that students are facing. And kind of, I like to use the analogy make it into a nice little bundle of issues that we can then advocate for at the state and federal levels. But overall, this has been a really rewarding experience, and I get to lead a team of 8 wonderful legislative ambassadors who are very dedicated to student government and are really excited to be that voice for students who typically aren't involved within student government. But in addition, this role has just taught me a high-level overview of student government and the inner workings. So,
and you feel like that's going to be kind of easy to apply to, maybe not easy, but the transitions, you don't feel inexperienced or anything like that once you're going into this government position.
I think it's a pretty big role going to Des Moines and talking to state legislators, and I think that definitely will equip me to have the honor, if elected, to serve as the next student body president.
Yeah, and I think one of the louder conversations in regards to student issues and student government is a lot of the legislation that has been passed in regards to DEI and some of those other laws and how it impacts the university. And I know that student government has kind of an interesting role in doing that, and obviously you guys aren't lawmakers. You guys aren't able to do these things, but this is a conversation that people are having. I guess in regards to your guys' campaign in the future, what can you guys do as student government to alleviate or address these issues if that's something that you guys are interested in doing? I guess just talk to me about your overview of that topic.
Yeah, absolutely. We understand and recognize the concerns with students just in wake of the recent changes to DEI programs on our campus, mainly with Senate File 2435. It's really concerning when you're a student and then you build community and then have that community kind of stripped away from you. We do have to comply with state and federal laws since we're a federally funded land-grant institution, but really one of the unique things within this realm is this doesn't apply to student organizations and student funding. So we can really work to create new clubs on campus for some of those services that may have been restructured or really work with those students to get them excited about starting a new organization where they can then create their communities. And then ultimately, we want them to come to student government and ask for funding to have new events and really further enhance their organizations and really build up their clubs. But definitely working to try and find ways that students can still find their communities on campus, even in light of the recent changes to DEI services.
Yeah, and that makes sense too. I know that that's one of the louder conversations, and there are other topics happening within student government too. And then I wanted to ask you guys a little bit about one of the really cool things about student government is that you are constantly working on and continuing the legacies of previous governments. And making sure that some of the events and stuff that they were doing get to continue on, or some of the stuff that they influenced. You guys get to decide if you're elected whether we want to continue doing this or whether we want to drop it or work on it. I'm interested in, I guess, your guys' views on this government now, and what are some of the things that you would like to keep from that government and continue on doing?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a wonderful question. And one of the really unique things that I've heard, and I've heard a lot of great student feedback, is the parking ticket relief program. So not only is this helping students who have a financial need on our campus, but it's also growing awareness and helping to fill those staffing shortages at SHOP. Students helping our peers, which is the food pantry on campus. And I think that's something that in recent years has really been brought to light, is that this resource is available to students, but they often struggle with staffing and personnel issues. But I think it's a really unique partnership that student government has the means to not only alleviate some of that financial stress, but then to also benefit an entire student population through making sure that SHOP has the adequate resources needed to be successful. And I think that's definitely something that Will and I would want to look into and really make sure that we can continue that service and make sure it's feasible for students.
And Martin and Quinn, I followed along pretty closely with their campaign last year. And one of the key things, which we touched on a little bit earlier, was transparency. And I think that's really what they're all about. They brought a lot of limelight to student government. A lot of people know about it. And so continue that momentum of, people realize that student government's a thing. And if you don't know about it, we want to share more about it. And then also they've built kind of a tradition of transparency and being open and honest, and the administration before. And we've just been slowly building on that. So we would be excited to continue on that, tradition of making student government more well-known and making it along the way more transparent as well.
Yeah, and those are both really good examples and keys. I think one of the biggest things that this government is working on has been pretty vocally is the idea of having a free concert on campus. So I have a couple hypotheticals I want to bounce to you guys, and I just want to see how you guys would feel. Let's say that for some reason the concert was not able to happen this semester, but we are relatively close. Is this a responsibility that you guys would be willing to take on to continue that process and put on the concert? Or vice versa, the concert happens and it's awesome. Would you guys want to continue building an event like that next year if it were to go successful? But I guess just in the future, you guys are elected. How are you guys going to handle doing this concert stuff regardless of the outcome?
And I think with the first piece, if it doesn't get done this year, but they've got all the building blocks in place. I mean, it's ready to be executed. We just need the time to make it happen. I think that's something we're willing to do. Students voted for it. They wanted it. And so if the building blocks are in place and it's ready to go, then we'd be excited to, help just take it through the finish line, obviously. I think it'd be irresponsible if something was ready, to go through the finish line and we were like, oh, no, we're going to stop right there. We've spent a ton of money and time and energy and dedication towards making this event happen, and then we just, put our foot down and say, no way. So I think that'd be generally irresponsible of us to do. And then the second piece, it's an outstanding success. I think that's partially where our homecoming piece comes in. You can find we allude a little bit to like the idea of having a big event, and that's exactly what this concert is, a big event. Students like that idea, and they want to see that happen. And if it's an overwhelming success, and I think the biggest piece is financials. Concerts are not cheap to pull off. They're not inexpensive. So it'd really be looking to make sure the financials are there, right? So I think a big piece last year was with the special events account, and it became somewhat inflated during COVID, and so there was some extra money there. And so if this concert were to happen this year and that money was used, obviously you can't do something again on the same scale next year. You have to wait for that money to sort of build back up, right? But I think we're super open. If people like something on campus or something's going really well, like we want to get behind it. We want to be a part of it. So I think that should answer both really pieces of that question.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to see what legacy you guys put on and what that looks. But are there any points or ideas floating around that you guys want to will into existence or anything like that? I'm really open to hear if there's anything else that we feel like we should have touched up on this episode. I want to make sure that you guys have ample platform to talk about the stuff that you guys are doing. But is there anything that we missed or anything else rattling around in there that maybe we should talk about?
Yeah, we talked about our platform being kind of a lot of ideas that Colby and I had came up with, and a lot of things that we had developed from hearing from other people. But it's really important to us that our platform is relevant, and that it's things that are actually affecting students. So if you're a student listening to this podcast now and there's something that's bothering you on campus or something that's annoying you or something that you think could just be better, if you go to our Instagram, there's a little link right in our bio, and it's like, I think it's titled like fill out your campus concern survey. And so if you fill that out, it'll go right to Colby and I's inbox, completely 100% anonymous. And so we hoped for this, maybe build on some of the ideas here. So that we'd like to be able to take things the next step further. So I encourage you to go look at our Instagram and learn more about, what we're all about, but also take that campus concern survey. And we would love to hear the things that are, you think could be better on campus.
Yeah. Completely going to echo what Will said, but also just want to touch on another major large-scale event that would be our responsibility to plan next year. So as I'm sure many of you are aware, Iowa State student government hosted the Big 12 conference this past fall. So that means next spring we will host the Big 12 on the Hill conference, which it's no small task to plan a large-scale conference for all the Big 12 schools, but So I want to bring that to the radar too, that we're already in the process of thinking through what that might look like. I'll be attending the Big 12 on the Hill in a few weeks and really taking it all in and learning what goes good, what could be improved on, and really how we can take that event to the next level too, just because that would be such a large part of our responsibilities if elected to serve next year.
Yeah, and then do you have any ideas, I guess, instinctively? I know you're going this semester, in a couple weeks, and you're going to learn about, all that process. But do you have any ideas right now that you're excited to share or anything? Or is it just remembering that this is going to be part of the duties as well?
I think it's just more so remembering that it's going to be part of the duties. Will and I are well aware that this is going to be a big responsibility, but I'm excited to be there and really attend it and just take it all in, and then also be interning out in DC this summer too. So hopefully find all the fun, local, cool spots. That would be really amazing to show off to everyone at the Big 12, but definitely a big event that would be our responsibility to plan in collaboration with the other schools.
Yeah. Well, Colby and Will, this was super awesome. To round this out, I just want to give each of you guys a platform to summarize maybe some of the points or the important stuff that you want the viewers to get out of this episode. Do any advertising and plugging that you find necessary. This is really just your platform to kind of round us out. We can start with Will and then we can end with Colby. But just this is your platform to just round it out and then kind of outro this episode.
Yeah, I hope you give us a follow on Instagram at BRANDTVLASEK, Brandt Vlasek. Give us a follow or even just look along and see what we have coming up. We got some really exciting things happening on campus. If you're in a student organization and you want to learn more about our campaign, in our bio as well as our contact information, call, text, email Colby or I, and we would love to come share our vision, for what this university could be with your student organization or your club. And I'm just really excited to be a part of something this cool and something this big and something that could really change the student experience here at Iowa State.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would just like to say thank you for taking the time to listen today and hear about our vision for Iowa State and how we've got your back because we care about you. And if there's one thing I can leave you with, I just want you to know that as a student at Iowa State University, you deserve to be safe, involved, and supported. When you're paying thousands of dollars to be a student here, I think those are what should be provided to you. And that's something we will work towards next year if elected to serve as the next student body president and vice president.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for coming on, and it was awesome chatting with you guys and hearing the points, and I look forward to seeing the results and supporting you guys in every way I can.
Yeah,
awesome.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.